Okay, so this Xbox One controller, one of the sticks was drifting, so we need to solder off the joystick and then solder a new one back on. So right now I'm unscrewing the back, and then I have to pry off these side panels to the controller. Sometimes they're hard to take off, you just gotta apply some force. It can be a little difficult. But then once you have both of them off, there's 2 screws on each side of the handle. So you have to unscrew both of those. Usually when you're unscrewing stuff, you want to press it down on a flat surface just because it's easier. But with controllers, the surface usually isn't flat, so you want to hold it sometimes so that you don't mess up the buttons on the controller. So once you unscrew everything in the back, you can take the front and the back panels off. Now I'm taking the plastic part of the joysticks off. And you can see the boards in the controller, they're screwed into each other, so in order to get the one out that I need to work on, I need to unscrew the board from the one on the bottom. And then I noticed there are some wires that are attached to the board also, so I need to, in order to take the board out, I need to solder those wires off. So I'm writing down the position of all the wires, that way when I put it back together I don't mix them up. So here I'm using my soldering iron. It's very hot. Definitely don't want to touch your fingers with it. You're melting the metal that's connecting the wire to the board in order to take the wire off. So now I'm going to use the hot air gun to melt all the metal that's connecting the analog stick at once, so it's just easier to take out. So moving in small circles. And then you don't really want to pull on it, kind of just want to hold it and let it fall out on its own. And then once it's out, you use this wick in the soldering iron, and when you heat up the solder, the wick sucks it up so that way the holes are clear and you're able to put a new analog stick in there. So now I'm applying flux to the board. All flux does is just helps distribute the heat better, so it makes it easier for the wick to absorb the metal. And then I'm using the soldering iron to heat up the metal so it can flow into the wick. And usually your fingers will get hot when you're doing this just because you're touching the metal that's so close to the heat. So sometimes you have to take a break for like a second or two just to let your fingers cool down for a bit. And then you have to make sure you keep the wick fresh. And then a trick I like to use is sometimes when all the solder isn't coming out right away, I apply some new solder to the iron and then I plug it back into the hole. That way it mixes with the old solder at the bottom, and it's just easier to get out. And now I'm just using the tweezers to poke out any of the flux that might have gotten to the board. So now I'm screwing it back in, clearing those holes again. And now I'm gonna apply this new analog stick. So it's a fresh one. You wanna put it, line up with all the holes, and then you have to put new solder on it. So that way it will stay on the board and it'll conduct electricity. So, but you wanna have it flat on the board so it can't be crooked. So in order to do that, I need to solder 2 anchor points directly diagonal from each other. And then once that's in, it's still gonna be a little lopsided. So what you need to do is you need to go one by one on each of the anchor points, and then just hold it in. And so you'll feel it click when you melt the metal. It'll click into place. A lot of times when it comes to making sure the analog stick is flat, I can be a bit of a perfectionist, so sometimes it takes a while. And now that the 2 anchor points are in and the analog stick is flat, I can now plug in the rest of the holes with solder. It's about 12 to 14 holes. They're very small. You want to make sure none of the points are touching, that otherwise it won't conduct electricity the right way, and you'll end up not being able to move. And when you're applying the solder, you don't want it to be flat on the board. You want each point to kind of come to a triangle, kind of like a Christmas tree shape. Now it's done. I'm just checking over my work one last time. It looks pretty good, so I'm going to turn off my soldering iron and I'm going to put it all back together. So I'm plugging it in. It took me a second to figure out which way it goes, but I figured it out. And then you plug it back in to the outlet. And now that it's secure, I'm taking a look back at my notes, and I have to solder the wires back into their place. So I'm just waiting for the solder iron to heat up. And now I'm just gonna melt the metal that's already on there and just put the ends of the wires inside. And then it cools very fast. It cools in like 3 to 5 seconds, so you don't really need to hold it that long. are 4 wires on each side. There's a red and black one that are connected to the motors that I'm gonna put in, and then there's the gray and black ones that I also need to put in. So that's why I wrote the note, so I don't get confused, because if you get it confused, and your controller is gonna be acting all sorts of weird. So now I'm putting the motors back in, and you're gonna solder those wires back in as well. Now that the wires are soldered back in, I'm gonna screw the board back into where it was so it's secure. Unfortunately, my recording stopped before I was done, but pretty much all we're doing now is just the reverse of taking it apart. I just need to put the panels back on, screw it in, and then just need to test it and make sure the analog stick works, and that's it.